Welcome to Building Better Relationships with Chuck and Barb Lewis, equipping listeners and viewers with the biblical tools to conquer the difficulties faced in this life. Chuck has practiced crisis intervention since the 1980s and has been in ministry together with his wife Barb for over 20 years. They've taken the countless lessons and the knowledge they've acquired and have put them into this life skills class to share with you. We hope this blesses you.
Hello everyone, I'm Pastor Chuck Lewis and this is my wife.
I'm Barbara.
And we're excited to be with you for another Building Better Relationships. And today our topic is...
Today we're going to talk about crucial conversations, or conversations that are very important that need to be made, but they're not easy.
They're not easy, and you know, a lot of times we need to make a very crucial conversations about situations that are not working. Mm-hmm. And the only way we can make them work better is to talk about it and get a plan together.
That's right.
And a lot of people don't know how to make those kind of conversations. So the result is, no, I don't touch that topic. We don't even talk about that.
Right.
Well, you know, that's one way to handle it, but nothing gets resolved.
Right.
Yeah. So somebody has to start that, and it can be the wife, can be the husband, but the children are kind of looking for us as leaders, you know, in the family to really be able to have a conversation that maybe is very intense. Maybe, you know, you have to talk about subjects that are not comfortable, things that are not working, behaviors that are not working. And the goal is to do it in a way that you have a good result.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And these conversations were hard for me when you and I got married because I really hated conflict.
Yes.
It hadn't turned out well in the past for me, so I did everything to avoid conflict.
Yeah.
Which meant, you know, I would avoid talking about things that were important. And the problem with that is that if you don't resolve issues, they just stay dormant until something else triggers them. And then you have a bigger blow up. So it's build up, blow up.
Yes. And, you know, you talk about not being able to handle conflict. I was so bad about handling conflict when I first started doing ministry that conflict used to literally take my breath away. And I couldn't breathe. And I thought,
relate to that.
That's nice. Am I going to walk around with a little bag and every time there's a conflict, I put it over my mouth to breathe? I mean, wow, you know, a lot of situations need talked about, and the conflict is always there. You know, we can't get away from conflict. It's just a part of life. But I believe that we can learn tools and skills to where we can have a good result, even though that's a very tough situation and a very hard situation. You know, the thing about conflict is everybody doesn't have to agree in a conflict. You can agree to disagree, and sometimes it's like honoring somebody else's opinion, even if you don't agree with it and you think it's completely off the wall. You can honor them by saying, well, you know, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Or, you know, I had a guy one time come up to me. He says, "Hey, Pastor, I think God's a woman. What do you think about that?" I said, "Well, you can think that. You can absolutely think anything you want." But I did not enter into the conflict with him because he did not want answers. He wasn't asking questions. He was convinced of something, and it's not our job to convince somebody to change their mind. Only the Holy Spirit can do that.
Yeah, in fact, I've heard a little saying, I don't have to attend every fight I'm invited to.
Oh, boy, that's so true. You know, if somebody asks you to dance, you can say no, and if somebody asks you to fight, you can say no. So,
right.
So, you know, it's learning how to turn the other cheek. And, you know, Barb, I had a need in my earlier years, still do at times, I guess, but I wanted to get the last word in. And so sometimes I'd have to walk away from a situation, literally grabbing a hold of my tongue and walking out of the room. Well, you can talk while you're holding your tongue, but nobody understands what you're saying. And that was good in my case, because it's probably a good thing they didn't understand what I was saying, because I was saying some powerful things in my mind. And if it was my choice to let them come out of my mouth.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. We always have choices. I mean, it doesn't matter if something triggers us, we can take a time out. In fact, learning the tools and skills really helped me to hang in there and have these important conversations. And it takes courage. But Chuck and I learned some things that we want to share with you that really helped us. And one of those were the speaker-listener, the rules. And I think whenever there's chaos, it helps to insert structure into it. And for me, I liked learning that I had to stick to one topic, not keep bringing up things that happened in the past, just deal with what just happened.
Right.
And that I could, have you stick to that rule too. In fact, if other things came up while we were talking about that one topic, we would just write it down on a piece of paper so that we could deal with that later.
Yeah.
But should we say what the rules are for speaker listener?
Well, like you say, you stick to one topic, and that's very important, because all kind of topics come to your mind that are unresolved when you're talking about one topic. But you have to really draw a boundary around those. And what we like to do is write them down, because you do need to talk about them.
Right.
And it's not like you never bring them up again. You bring them up at a different time. Maybe you pick another time to say, while we were talking, I thought about this issue that I still need to have resolved. The way we resolve conflict is you have to talk about it. If you bury it and you put it down, you say, well, I've learned not to say anything. It's just better to not say anything. Well, that's one way, but the thing is, nothing gets resolved. So you've got to take the risk to voice what you feel and what you need, and you have a saying of always doing it kind.
Yeah, say what you mean what you say, and don't say it mean.
Don't say it mean.
And we've all heard the first part of that, but we haven't necessarily heard the part about not saying it mean.
Right.
Because if you say it mean, if you start out the conversation on a bad foot, it's just going to go downhill from there. But I really, having a voice, I think, has been a lifetime journey for me. But what happens if you don't have a voice is that resentment builds up. So you think that you're avoiding conflict by not talking about things, but really you just keep stuffing them down. And if you don't have a voice and address things, then your body absorbs the war, and you will have physical problems, headaches, stomach aches.
Right.
You'll develop physical problems. But anyway, the rules for the speaker is you take turns being the speaker listener, because you both can't talk and listen at the same time.
It's true.
So one of you speaks, and you speak for yourself. You don't mind read. You say what you think and feel about something. You don't go on and on about it, but you say, address your thoughts and feelings and what you would like to see happen. And then you stop and let your partner paraphrase.
Right.
And, the listener is not trying to figure out what they're going to say when you're talking. They are supposed to listen to what you're saying, because they're going to need to paraphrase back what they think that you said. And it's always good for the listener to ask questions to clarify. And maybe if the listener doesn't paraphrase back what you're saying, the speaker can say, what did you get from what I just said, or what did you understand?
Right.
Because what we mean to say is not always what the listener hears, because we as listeners a lot of times hear things through our filters of life experience. So it's important, for us to identify those filters if we can. But the listener doesn't rebut what you're saying or deny what you're saying. You're basically focusing on what the listener says for understanding. You focus on the speaker's message, and then you paraphrase back what you heard them say and what you thought they meant by that, and you keep going back and forth. Then the listener takes a turn being the speaker, and the other person is the listener, and you just keep doing that until you have a thorough understanding about what's going on. And you and I learned some words not to say to each other. Mm-hmm. And those words are divorce. Don't bring up divorce. You don't want to see that happen. So Chuck always says, don't say what you don't want to see happen.
Right.
And don't use final words like I'm done. I'm out of here. I've had it. Mm-hmm. Because those kind of words say I'm leaving.
Right.
And Chuck and I like to reassure each other that we're not going anywhere, that the marriage wall, the marriage wall is intact. Mm-hmm. And you can deal with a lot of difficult things inside of that wall of commitment. And one thing that you and I talked about as we were discussing this is what did each of us need? How can we develop safety for each other so that we can talk about these difficult conversations? And what are some of the things that you identified that you feel like you need in order to have a difficult conversation?
See, that part is critical, I believe, because the more intense the topic is, the more you need to lay some groundwork. I mean, if you're going to build a building, you're going to have to make sure the foundation is solid and secure. Because it doesn't matter how beautiful the building is, if the foundation's not right, you're going to have to tear it all back down. So laying that foundation of saying what you just said, Barb, I want you to know that we need to talk about this topic, and we know this is a very tender, sensitive topic to both of us, and it brings up a lot of feelings in both of us. But I want you to know before we talk about it that I'm completely committed to you. I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. The walls of our marriage are completely intact, and that will never change.
Right.
See, that's so important, because we can start talking about an issue and then feeling like the other person's saying, I'm out of here. I'm wanting to get out. And now your mind starts going into that direction, and you're thinking, gosh, I thought our marriage was stronger than this, and it sounds like my marriage is falling apart. And we forget all about the topic that we originally started talking about, because now we're off in this other area, and our mate is looking at us like, what are you talking about? I'm not talking about leaving. I'm not talking about, separating or whatever. See, you've got to clarify that from the very beginning. I'm completely committed to you, and I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. That gives us peace when we hear those words.
Right. In fact,
yeah.
Didn't you have a client one time, and you kept track of how many times the man mentioned the word divorce?
Oh yeah.
Tell us about that.
He kept bringing it up through the session, and I let him talk. They talked for 45 minutes. They gave me the last 15 minutes, and I said, well, is divorce what you really want to see happen in this relationship? And the guy says, well, no. What do you think we're here for? And I said, well, it's interesting that if you don't want to see that happen, why have you brought it up 18 times in the last 45 minutes?
Right.
I said, I've been sitting here counting how many times you brought that up. He goes, what? And his wife says, yeah, you say that all the time. So we don't want to say what we don't want to see happen. If you don't mean that, if you don't want that, don't ever say it.
Right.
People say, oh, I was just upset, or I was just angry, or I was just frustrated. Well, you got to put a boundary around your words. And like Barb mentioned, if you can't avoid saying those words, you need to take a time out and say, I thought I was ready for this conversation, but I guess I'm not. And one thing I was thinking while you were speaking is I wanted to bring out the fact that sometimes, now I believe in being mentored, and I mentor a lot of men, and I used to have to go to a lot of men to be mentored. Kenneth Hagin was one of my mentors years ago when I was first met the Lord, and I didn't even know who he was at that time. I didn't know how big his ministry was, but he took me on and wanted to mentor me. I'll get that out in a minute. And, it was wonderful because he gave me the foundation to build my life on and my spiritual life on. And without that mentoring, I would not be the man that I am today. And it's hard for a lot of men to admit that they don't know something. But I told Kenneth Hagin, I said, I need all the stuff that you want to give. I need every bit of it because I don't know anything about how to be a good man of God, how to be a good husband, how to be a good father. I don't know any of that stuff. And please show me how to do it. And God began to bring other men into my life as well to teach me how to do that. It's not admitting that you don't know how to do something that's going to tear your self-esteem apart and say you're a big mistake with buttons and zippers. It's just saying, I don't know how to do that, but I do want to learn how to do it. I mean, I've learned how to do projects around the house that I didn't know, how to do. And, it was great to learn how to do that because now, if that breaks down, I know how to do it, see? And relationships are the same way. So having a crucial conversation with somebody takes work, it takes practice, it takes skill, and sometimes you might need to go over that crucial conversation with somebody that's mentoring you before you talk to your mate or your children or whatever about it, and help and have them give you some pointers on what not to say and what to say instead. That might help a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you said, we practice for a fire drill. Why not practice having some of these critical conversations?
Absolutely.
And saying things that are, important.
Right. I mean, we know to call 911, but we never planned for an emotional 911. And I've had to call 911 probably 3 times in my lifetime, and yet we have emotional 911 sometimes on a daily or weekly or monthly basis. So, but that's something we don't practice for. And I think that's so amazing that we don't rehearse, we don't practice. See, practice doesn't make you perfect, it makes you better. And the more you practice something, the better you get.
Right, and I think it's important to think about what you're going to say. Use your internal editor before it comes out of your mouth. And there's an acronym for think. And is what you're about to say thoughtful, helpful, intelligent, necessary, or kind?
Yes.
If it doesn't fit in any of those categories, you probably don't need to say it. And James 1:19 says, be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. So it is emphasizing the thing that we need to listen. It's a way of letting our spouse or partner or child or friend know that we really care about them. We can communicate that we care or we don't care by what we do and the words that we the words that we say and how well we listen, because listening is a way of showing love to each other.
It really is. And our time's gone today, but we're going to be talking more about how to even have a conversation with each other. Having a crucial conversation is one thing, but I just sense there's people listening to us right now that says, I don't even know how to have a conversation. So we're going to be talking about that next. And so join with us and take notes, call your friends, call people that really need to hear this, and maybe they can tune in as well.
Say something before we close.
Time's gone, so go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I feel like we need to develop more the topic of how to be safe for each other.
Yes.
So that we can have these conversations. So possibly this is part 1.
This is part 1.
And we're going to talk about this again next time.
We'll do part 2 next time. Well, God bless you. Thank you for joining us today. Please press the like, subscribe, and share button. This helps us on our program, and we will look forward to seeing you next time.
If you are blessed by this ministry, please subscribe, like, and share. You can also make donations at chucklewisministries.com. Join us to keep uncovering the tools to build better relationships together. Let's do this again next week.